Well, hello, I'm Edmo Tola, and I'm presenting 2011 Payroll Year-End Closing. So I will move my smiling face out of the way. This download of this document should be available, as well as others, on our website. So this presentation was given today on November 22nd. Traditionally, we present this at the third Tuesday of the month, but we waited until Great Plains had published their update. We're going to cover two different things in this presentation: payroll, human resources, and business portal updates for 2011, and then the tax updates for 2012. All the things that we do at the end of the calendar year. The most important thing is this is not an optional update this year. There are significant changes, and Great Plains is telling us that we must update, and we'll qualify that as we go through. We're only supporting GP 2010 and GP 10, that's versions 10 and 11. Small Business Financials and GP 9.0 are no longer supported, and you should update, or at least contact us for how to get around those issues. Let's talk about what's changed. Primarily, there was a change this year between the employee Social Security withholding and the employer Social Security matching, where traditionally they've always been a one-to-one match. Now there were different rates, and Microsoft had to edit the code to allow for that change. Let me show you what was involved. They made an interim change in January to the tax tables to allow for this change. So previously, there was a FICA S code that affected both employer and employee. And that code had a rate of 6.2%. Now this is the employee rate of 4.2 with an annual cap of $106,800. And there is a separate code for the employer FICA, and it has a rate of 6.2. They've done similar changes to Medicare, so that if they ever diverge, they will be controlled separately, the employee and the employer. They had to rush this out because the feds changed that in the last 2 weeks of the year. So they got it to work for payroll processing, but there are windows and reports that aren't pulling this information accurately. And I think that they've also revamped the code on that to make it work better. So that is the primary reason why this update is there. You may encounter issues if you don't have this upgrade. So it's a required upgrade to handle those rates through the year-end reporting. They weren't concerned about year-end reports and updates at that point in time in January, and now we are, and we want to make sure that you have this in place before you create your final year-end wage file. The next thing is changes in the W-2. If we look at the W-2 form, this box 9 is now grayed out because the earned income credit is no longer valid. You can still get an earned income credit refund on your tax return, but there's no refund going on from the employer throughout the year. The code for that is still in GP, as is the Hire Act, but they will not go to the year-end wage file. It will shut down those postings. If you didn't have the upgrade, you would get zeros printed in this gray field. If they were to scan this, that might have an issue. So other than that, the form has not changed. And that's an important enough change right there. And the form now has two new codes for box 12. Box 12 is the retirement plan box, where the retirement and other things go. And there are new codes for health plan contributions. Both the employer and the employee tax-sheltered health plan contributions like health, medical, dental, optical, all of those are required in the coming year to be reported in box 12 with code DD. It is optional in 2011. It's FYI for the employees, so if you want to get that in place this year, you need to have this update. Here's what's involved in setting that up. If we go to the payroll series and we go to the setup for a medical plan, this one has an employee withholding and an employer match. And that amounts to box 12DD on the payroll side for the employee deduction. They'll accumulate there. And there'll be a benefit. This is a benefit. And it will be box 12DD also. So in addition to your retirement plans, that box 12 will now have multiple codes, and these will all add up together to show what the total contribution was. If we look at the W-2 instructions, and I'm going to go down to, these are the instructions for W-2s and W-3s. Actually, there it is. Cost of employer-sponsored health coverage. So as long as the employer is sponsoring the health coverage, then both legs show. And that's what we're going to have there. The other new code is EE, Roth contributions under a 457 plan. For those of you who are not familiar, we've already always had these. These are tax-sheltered retirement plans. And if it's a 401k, it was D, E, F, G, and H. In the last few years, we've had Roth plans, which are not tax-sheltered, and we had AA and BB. Now they've added a 457 as EE. So just a new option. And if you're using Mag Media, it will verify if they're in there correctly. If it's W-2s, you just got to put in the right label. So there's some other W-2 changes. In addition, the logic for the retirement plan checkbox has changed. And I'm going to show you what's changed on that. So I'm going to go back to Great Plains. And I'm going to go to Cards, Tax, and there is the retirement plan checkbox. And the rule has always been, if you're eligible for a retirement plan, then this box should be checked. But again, the code has changed a little bit, and here's what it now says. So I'm going to go down to page 11, and I'm looking for box 13. Okay. Retirement plan. Down here. This box should be marked if they are active for any part of the year in any one of these retirement plans. The D, E, F, G, or the Roth plans, all those ones that we were just looking at. If they have any of those, then it should be checked. Well, because the rule is simpler now, Great Plains has made it easier with this update. If I were to edit W-2s and look at Pilar Ackerman, she has the retirement plan box checked. Because when we created year-end, it pulled in the information from this screen here and dropped it in. But notice these other people. It isn't marked as I'm scrolling through these. Retirement plan isn't marked, and yet they do have the retirement plan, and it is marked here. And the way it works now is it looks at the employee, goes to their deductions, and if they have any deductions in box 12 with the proper label that would indicate a retirement plan, and they have an amount in there for the year, then it will be included. Note I'm working in year 2017, even though we're in 2011, that's where my sample data is, but that is the live year. So, it created these retirement plan checkboxes on the W-2s, even though they weren't here. I'll get on the same employee. Buchanan is not marked on his employee info screen, and yet this is marked here. On the other hand, if you mark this and they don't have that code, it will still come through. So I have an employee called Test. It's marked. He has no medical withholdings of any kind, and yet when I come out here, his W-2 does have it marked. Now he's not going to get a W-2 because he had no wages, but if he had wages and you marked it here, it would come across, even though he wasn't active on it. So my recommendation is to unmark this box for everybody and let the software do what it's designed to do now. And I have a feeling they'll probably take that box away because it's not needed anymore. And that'll make your life simpler. All right, W-3 form. Most of us print the W-3 to screen, not to an aligned form. But there are some changes in it, and one way or the other, you're going to need this code. So if I go to print W-2s and I bring up the transmittal form, which is the W-3, I have two check boxes now. One for type, for kind of payer, and a new one for kind of employer. And because of that, everything moved down. So if I were trying to print on the form, it wouldn't align without the tax update. Well, what are those new fields? They're right here. This is the new kind of employer. If you're any kind of 501c, which is a kind of a tax-exempt organization, then you would have to indicate that when you print your W-3. It defaults to none apply. So 90% of us, we just open this window, accept the non-apply, and we get the result of this checkbox. Let's look at the W-3 form itself. This is the old piece, this is the new. On the new one, it will check this none apply based on how we answered those questions. You also have to manually mark third-party sick pay. There's nothing in GP that triggers that. GP will trigger kind of pay based on whether you're a 941 or a Medicare qualified government employee. There are programs for government entities where you can be exempt from Social Security but still be qualified for Medicare. That's MQGE. And we see that right here. We're either regular or MQGE. They're separate postings, separate reports. If you're regular, it'll hit 941. If you're MQGE, it'll hit this box. If it's anything else, you're going to have to white it out and hand mark it. This will now be enabled over here by this new field down here. So that's a new feature. And I talk about the type of payer here, the kind of employer here, and that boxes 9 and 12B have been disabled. 9 was the EIC, 12B was the Hire Act. The code for these is still in Great Plains, it's just not used anymore. So if I go back up to here and look at tax, we still have Hire Act and we still have EIC, but they won't go anywhere. They won't drive anything. Nothing will happen with them. If you had balances in there, the W-2s will not get them. So the W-2s, the employees can take earned income credit on their return, but not as a credit from the employer throughout the year. So they've dropped them from the reporting here. And those are changes in the W-3 form. In the instructions for W-2s and W-3s, right at the top, it talks about earned income credit and how you have to tell the employee that that's a change. So on the W-2 format, if you buy the right form, there is a note here on earned income credit. Up a little higher here. Right here on the back of the employee federal form, copy B. And if you're not buying forms from a reputed dealer who includes all these certified notes on the back, you have to provide them some kind of facsimile to tell them that they can take the earned income credit on their tax return. So we recommend that you go to Deluxe Business Forms and order your W-2s from there, and we'll be talking about that later, but those forms should have all those inclusions. Because of those changes for kind of employer and the removal of the Hire Act, the code had to change for how we create a MAG media file. If you have over 250 employees, you must create a MAG media file, and there's a federal MAG media software for Great Plains. There's also other software that lets you separate out the states to their own MAG media files available from Green Shades. So in order to get that kind of employer field, we had to change the code so the MAG media file works properly, and to get rid of these other records from the Hire Act and the Earned Income Credit. So that would be another requirement, the reason why you would need this update. Those are the changes in the W-2s and W-3s and to the functionality in the software. But while they have this year-end update out there, they've also included changes to the 1099 forms for your payables. There are no changes to the 1099 miscellaneous and interest, but the 1099 dividend had some format changes. So if you don't want to edit formats, you need this upgrade. In payroll, we have retirement employees that get a pension plan instead of a regular check, and we report those as a 1099-R out of payroll, not payables, and there were some changes. And I've never encountered anybody who uses that, but it is in the software. If you use Business Portal for time and attendance and employee profiles so that the employees can enter in changes to their time, direct deposits, emergency contacts, etc., there's a place where they have a W-4 form. And every year we have to make a cosmetic change to the form to remove the 2010 year and make it say 2011 or 2012 in this case. So that update will be available in December. It is just a cosmetic change to the form. Again, we phased out Earned Income Credit, and there's information about it on the back of copy BW2. The Hire Act died at the end of last year, and even though the information is there, it doesn't run anymore, and it doesn't affect our 941. A very important update is that the FUTA tax rate changed in mid-year. So the first half of the year was 0.8%, like it's been since time immemorial, but now they reduced it to 0.6%. If you try to create a year-end 941 report, 940 report out of the system, and that would be done by just printing the period end report for FUTA, then you're going to get the wrong information, and here's why. You have to do it for each half of the year. So I'm going to go to Setups for Unemployment Tax. So right now I have mine at 0.6%. This is a company-wide setting. There's nowhere there to tell it for certain dates. They really need to put an update in here, and they haven't fixed this yet, because there's an easy workaround. When you do the report to get the information, you would have to say 01/01/11 through, well, my date is 17, so I'll go through there. 01/01/17 through 06/30/17, and I would print my FUTA report. And from it, at the bottom of the report, I would get my totals for the first 6 months. I would then need to add those to the totals I get for the last 6 months. But this is using the wrong rates. Make this big enough to see. It's running this at the 0.6%, whereas the first 6 months were 0.8. So I have to change the setup to 0.8, run 6 months of reports, change it back to 0.6 and run it again for the other 6 months, and add them up to get my total FUTA tax due and FUTA tax numbers. there is no 940 return out of Great Plains, like there is 941 returns. So you've got to use that report. And that'll be a one-time workaround this year. From now on, it's 0.6% in the coming year, and it'll be that way all year until they change it again. Similarly, pseudo-tax rates change. We usually don't know till mid-January. Our state agencies inform us what they are. So in the same window, set up unemployment. I'll put in Utah. My rate will change depending on my performance, and the cap will change. This year it was 28.3, and from what I've been able to tell from looking out on the web, it's going to go up to 28.6. Our Social Security caps haven't changed for a couple of years. Our Medicare never changes, but our rates changed here, but the caps did not. But here we'll have a change, and here we'll have a change, and this went from 0.6 to 0.8, and the cap stayed the same. So you've got all this information out here on page 2. So be aware of those things. You don't put in the pseudo rate changes till you publish your pseudo reports in the new year. And if you want to accrue quarterly, you're going to need to do that sometime in January. And then put in the new rates, and then start accruing quarterly. By that I mean when you do the pseudo report, you have the option to post. Let me get to period end reports here. It's not only a pseudo report, it's a posting. So you have to plug in the right setup. So create your year-end reports for 2011, and then change your rates for 2012 so you can accrue this monthly in January, starting January. All right, the year-end updates include some fixes for things that are beyond Great Plains. If we go to the last page, I gave you a list of bug fixes. There were only 2 for payroll, and one of them I've seen. When we recreate the pay stub, it wasn't working right with attendance. Let me show you what was involved, because this was a really cool feature of the newest version of Great Plains, version 2011. If I bring up an inquiry and pick anybody's check, I can recreate a pay stub. So there is a pay stub for that employee. Down here, it gives me my vacation and sick pay available. This is pulling from the payroll side. But if you have human resources loaded and you're using attendance to replace the payroll, vacation, and sick buckets with the much more powerful accrual-based attendance, vacation, and sick buckets, you have to modify the form to bring in the attendance fields. But they were failing. It was reporting 0. So they've now fixed it, and you will see the proper balances and the proper codes there from attendance. That was one of the patches. The other patch was that if you were working on an existing employee and you had the employee screen open and you went and cleared, that was just supposed to remove the window, the employee, but in some cases it was actually deleting the employee, and that was a problem. So they fixed that. Beyond that, there's fixes in inventory, manufacturing, sales, field service, eConnect, and extender. So you should look through this list and fixed assets. There are some luxury depreciation changes, some new rates. So keep in mind all of those things as another thing that's included in this year-end update. After completing the year-end update and you've installed it, then you will see this 11/17 date in the payroll setup window. So under setup, payroll, we have 11/17. They actually released it on the 15th when I downloaded it, but they officially published it on the 17th. And that's how you know you've uploaded it. So another way is to look at About Microsoft Dynamics GP. It'll be build 11/00/1860. It's inclusive of Service Pack 2, which was the Round 2 mid-year update, kind of like version 11.5, which has some wonderful new features. And you'll need to address those by looking at your What's New document, and I would recommend you look at that to see what's included in the Round 2 update that is included in this Service Pack. Let's look at what it takes to load the Service Pack. If you're on GP10, it's here. GP11, which is GP 2010, is here. And we haven't gotten the one for the W4 form on the business portal yet, but that'll come out in mid-December. So I'm going to click on the one for version 10 this time. It's opening me up to Partner Source or Customer Source. And if you don't have access to this award-winning site, you need to get it. When you pay for your 15 to 18% annual enhancement, you get access to this website. You get knowledge base articles, service packs, updates. The main thing you're getting is your update potential, but there are online classes, there are white pages, and a wealth of knowledge base articles to help you debug errors that you're getting. You can open a case online with Great Plains. There's a ton of things out here. So there's an overview here, then there's the changes, and these are the things we've gone over. There's installation instructions, warning you that it's going to affect your reports and forms dictionaries and other things, so you need to back them up. And then there's the download, and it will download it, and then you'll execute it. It includes this PDF file and this PDF file. The first PDF file is the US 11 year-end PDF file, which has line-by-line instructions for installing the update and the tax update as well, and the procedures you go through in payroll, fixed asset, human resources, and the other related modules to close the year-end down. When we're closing payroll, we're not moving things from open to history like we are in other modules. We're just creating some new tables and adding more information to the year-end tables. The details always exist. We can create and remove year-end at will, and as long as the details are out there, we can recreate the year-end. So that document is available, and you'll also have a W-2 form similar to this, so you'll see the format and what's in all of the boxes in box 12, etc. So you always have that guide. All right. That's the year-end update that affects payroll, a little bit of payables, and you saw other modules that get updated with certain patches. That should be in place before the end of the year. You can work without it for now, or you can work with it. I found that it really makes no difference as far as the accuracy of your payroll year-end wage file, but when it comes to generating W-2s, it will make a difference. And I would recommend that you have it in place before you do your final year-end wage file. And you'll see today that I create and remove that year-end wage file many times as I verify. So drop it in now, and you'll be set to go. If we're on version 9, go to version 2011, which is GP 2010. If you're on 10, you may want to upgrade all the way to the version 2010. But you have this update for either one of those two versions. You'll also have tax updates in the new year. And these are the things that will be included in them. Changes to federal withholding, changes to state withholding for these 3 states. So far, for those of us that are local in Utah and Idaho, there are no changes announced. Disabling or phasing out the earned income credit, and we never know if the Social Security limit may change. Let me show you what I mean with those. Close that and go back to Administration, Payroll Taxes. We always expect to see a change in the federal. So if I'm married, I have this annual exemption amount, and it usually goes up by $50 a year. Well, they haven't published the Circular E yet, so I don't know. We won't see the report from Great Plains for another month, but I expect that'll go up to $37.50 whether we're single or married. And then they have their tables. Last year, we lost the 39% bracket, and we kept these, and there was some reduction in taxes. All of these will change. Similarly, as we said, FICA Social Security changed to the 4.2%. And it may change back. If Congress doesn't get its act together and doesn't renew it, by default it will fall back to 6.2. That may not be in the update we get in mid-December if Congress still hasn't acted. So we may have to get another update in round 2 in January. So watch for information to be published on that. If you're not receiving the Social Security news, you should Google Social Security news and pick that up, and I'll include that in a link on this final document. So you'll have a way to learn about changes in Social Security Administration. Looking at one state, I'll go to Utah. Utah made a major change a few years ago. They used to look like the federal tax tables with an amount and tables. Now it's just a flat percent. But it's not exactly flat. Back when they gave us this change, we had to update the code at year end to enable the tax update in the new year because we needed a place to put personal exemptions and special exemptions. So low-income people have less than 5% based on these settings, which are different for married and single. But Utah is not expected to change this year. They published no Circular 14, and there's been no announcement that I can find on any website, and Microsoft is not aware of any changes. So if you have these states, you'll need the update. We'll all need it because of that, and that is a very simple process. You need to log into Great Plains as the SA user. That's a system administrator, so you may need an IT person to do this. You go to Microsoft, Maintenance, Tax Updates, check for tax updates. I always try the automatic method, and I put in my registered number, and you can use ours, 487-8400, or yours. And if you don't know it, you can use ours. It's system-wide. It affects every company in your database because it goes to the Dynamics system database. It's looking to see. Mine's already been loaded. I'm going to tell it to continue. And now it's running a SQL script against my tax tables and giving me the latest payroll tax tables that we were looking at. Notice the last code update was 715 and the last tax update was 825. Mine is old. There have been no new ones since midsummer. But one of those in the middle of the summer was a code update because some state changed significantly the way they do things, and they had to change the code, kind of like our year-end update, in order to enable this simple tax update. If your tax update doesn't work and you get errors, then you would have to do this update manually. That means you'd have to go to the website, find the update, download it, and then there's a procedure for that. Or you can just plug it into a SQL script and run it from SQL Server Management Studio Query Analyzer. One way or the other, you need those in place. And that's those. So we talk about those here, and we talk about this need. If you create your year-end wage file and then load the tax update, and then you have to rebuild your year-end wage file, it would look at the Social Security cap in the new year instead of the one in the old year. That used to be an issue because if you rebuilt it and this was now $107,000 and you withheld only $106,800, you would be getting errors that your W-2s are short. Because the limits are the same, we don't really have to worry about this anymore. But since we haven't seen Circular yet and we don't know what the rates are for sure, watch for that. If they raise the cap for Social Security, then you're going to have to be careful to edit that cap like I've shown you in the payroll tax setup after you load the 2012 update and then put it back before you run a payroll. You might have to go back and forth. Okay. There's a lot of information out on the web that you need to know. If you need forms or you want to see what's in them, you can go to that link and we'll look for Circular E, which is publication 15. And you can see that the only one we have right now is 2011. There's no 2012 yet. They haven't got those out there. Similarly, the state of Utah has one, etc. That's an IRS forms. If you're not going to this site to upload your 941 information, you should get on this e-file. And you can do that for 941s quarterly and your FUTA return 940 annually. So those are good services. You need to register and wait for PIN numbers, and some of those take a while. The one that takes the longest is the SSA for Mag Media, and that's their BSO website, which stands for Business Services Online. If you go to this link, then there's your welcome page, and that's where you log in. And if you haven't renewed your password in the last quarter, you'll have to renew it. So I did mine the other day. I logged in. It took me into the website. It said my password was expired. It let me refresh it and give it a new one. This is where we go to upload the Mag Media files. This can take up to a month to receive. If you do not have a PIN number, or nobody in your organization has a PIN number and a password, you need to get on this now so you'll have the tool when you need it. And we'll talk about when you need to file shortly, but I'm preparing you for that. On that same site, and at this link within it, there's a tool called AccuAge, and it changes every year to test the newest Mag Media formats. So you'll need to load the latest tool to test your Mag Media file if you're doing EFW2 reporting through a Mag Media file. Similarly, Utah Forms and Publications, Circular 14 hasn't changed, so it's really what we've had before. And the place where you go to upload the Mag Media file, and the place where you go to upload SUTA, wage lists, new hires, and payments. All of these things you should be using, and they make things a lot easier. There's a way to create this wage list through Green Shades, and there are ways to pull that out of Great Plains into Excel so you can import it there. So let me know if you're looking for that solution. There's no automatic download to create that, so you can upload it to these websites. Target release dates. On 11/15, we got the year-end update for GP 10 and 11, which is 2010. Tax updates will be available in mid-December, as well as that business portal update for the W4. It usually comes out around the 15th. In mid-January, there will be another update. So far, they're not predicting any code changes. The code change is all in the year-end update up here to enable any of these. But should a state change something that requires a change to the programming code, then they would put that into that January 2011 update, and you would have to run update procedures again. These updates need to be run at the server and every workstation before it can run properly. And it modifies the modified forms and reports dictionaries, and they can get corrupted. So there are very detailed instructions on these websites that tell you what to do. So in this document, it tells you what to do, and there are adequate warnings throughout to tell you that these are going to be affected. We often recommend that you let us help you with that, because we know the tricks and tips and tricks on how to get around those so that you have a successful upgrade. Large companies can take overnight to 2 days to run this upgrade. On sample data like this, it took me 30 minutes, but I've seen ones that take a matter of days. And you've got to keep everybody out till it's done. So this year-end update is a big deal, especially if you don't have a strong IT department with experience. And so we recommend that you contact us, and my contact information is down here at the bottom, and I'll put you together with some of the consultants who are scheduling this service for us this year. All right, we've been through the release dates. Let's talk about when you need to file. If you're on paper copies of W-2s, you've got till the end of January. If you're on paper copies for the employer W-2s, we've got leap year this year, and so it's Wednesday the 29th. If you're doing mag media for the federal copies, you've got to the end of March, which falls on a Saturday, so they graced it over to the first business day of the next week, Monday the 4th. You really want to know that everything's ready by the time you do this filing on Tuesday, January 31st. But should you hand out those W-2s and somebody says they're wrong, and you agree and you fix it, you've got till the end of February to recorrect everything and send this in, or April 2nd if you're doing mag media. I don't recommend you send it in advance of your having to, but you better have a good reminder to not forget, or there'll be penalties. And there are other reminders here about 1099s, 940s, and other quarterly reports. Forms. Let me show you the forms, and then we'll come back to here and talk about the certified forms from Deluxe Business Systems. So, we'll come back through the procedures in a little bit, but I'm going to show you payroll, print W-2s, and look at the forms. I want routines, print W-2s. The W-2 form has 4 kinds. I doubt anybody's still using a dot matrix printer, so we don't need 1 wide or 2 wide forms anymore, even though it defaults to that. We want the single feed, 1 wide, or the 4 up. I use the 4 up for employees. That means 1 piece of paper with 4 quadrants, easy to fold and stuff. And I use this one for the employer copies, although you could use it for employee as well. So if I print the single wide form, notice this new one, none applies, and it's regular, 941. Those will be effective for the W-3 form. I get Pilar Ackerman here, and then I get Angela on the next one, and that's my first page. Then I get another page with 2 more people. So I have to separate these forms. If I'm using these for the employer, there's a red federal copy, and there's black city and state and employer copies. And the same thing for the employee. And for the employee, I'd have to separate them and put them together, unless I'm using the dot matrix form, which has carbons, but those are harder to feed. So notice my long address here. This person was using the full length of the address, and it prints it. It has address line 1 and address line 2, just like the company does, but it's hiding address line 3. If I go to the company address ID, 1, 2, and 3, it doesn't show number 3. So we have to squeeze it in the other 2 by creating a new ID, maybe call it W3 ID, and then apply that here, and you'll have them condensed because it doesn't print them. It doesn't have another space. Similarly for the employees. If I go up to the employee card, even though I have 3 lines of address, it'll only show first and second. Notice that long address I typed in. It's showing all of that, but Mag Media will truncate it to the first 22 characters. And who cares? The Mag Media file isn't where we're mailing it to, it's just FYI for the feds, and if it chops off their suite number, no big deal. but maybe one of these days they'll make that a longer field. Right now they have bill to and ship to addresses, and we don't even need both of those. We don't have any way to put two addresses and send those to the W-2s in Great Plains. It just sends the primary address from this screen. Alright, so forms. I recommend, whether you're doing Mag Media or not, that you always do the employee laser 4-up form, so that you have everything in one quadrant. That's this one. Laser 4-up, print, go, and I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. Can you see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 quadrants? Same information in each one. And there's an employee page here and another employee on the next. So it's Pilar, Pilar, and then up above that, Pilar and Pilar, all 4 quadrants. The form on which it prints will say federal copy A, state copy B, city state zip, and employee copy. They'll get 4 on one form that stuffs right into the window envelopes and get the self-seal. And don't keep licking forms. You can get those bundled, and if you're doing Mag Media, that's all you need. Unless you have multiple states, and some of the states don't have a requirement for Mag Media, and you're just printing their copies, then you may need some of the employer city-state forms, and you can buy those for as many as you need. And those are a 2-up form. So if you don't use Mag Media, you'll need these, and if you don't want to use the 4-up, you'll need these. So, and there's bundles, etc. So whether you call V or call them direct, use this code. You'll get some pricing that's appropriate, and it'll help us to track that you're actually getting the service. 1099s, there's bundles for those. They come with a 1096, and there's envelopes. When you buy W-2s, they'll include at least one W-3 form, which you won't need if you're doing Mag Media, because the Mag Media file is its own W-3. So get those forms coming. The longer you wait, the longer it takes to get them. How do you know how many you need? My preferred way of finding out how many you need is to create the year-end wage file and print the W-3 form. So I'll close the W-2, print the W-3, print, screen, go. Right above your EIN is the number of copies on the W-3 form. If I bring this open, that's this field, total number of forms. It's right above your EIN. So you can do it today. Create a year-end wage file, print the W-3 up, see how many you need, and then delete the year-end wage file. And I say that you should delete the year-end wage file because you cannot run any current payrolls or make any adjustments while there's a year-end wage file for that year. So I've made my date 2017. Even if I'm in the new year, I want to always roll it back to some date in 2017 when I'm doing year-end procedures, because certain things default to that year. For example, a report for quarter end asks me what dates, but not what year. It assumes this year from our user date. In January, if you're trying to reprint the January quarter end report, it will come up with 0 because you don't have any payroll for quarter of 2011 yet when you're in 2012. It's going to try to do 2012. It always goes to the year you're in. So roll it back to where you should be. Remember, I'm doing 2017 and my new year is 2018, where yours would be 2011 and 2012. Well, that affects our year-end closing. I'm going to reclose and delete 2017 and recreate. And then I'm going to print my W-2s grab my W-3, and print that. And that's where I get that 29 on this form. Another report that would give it to you, but you need the year-end wage report, is this one. This is a very powerful report that gives you your W-2s in a report layout. I never bother to print the employer W-2, but I do print this one to a file. And you'd have to do that before you send it up here. I'll show you how in a minute. And you get a page for every employee. So I have 29 pages, one for each employee. The final page has the grand totals on it. So nice, because I can see my state totals. I wish it gave me number of employees in that state as well, so I would know how many W-2s I need, but it doesn't give me that. We got to count them up. Our system is not designed to do any reporting by state. It gives you federal information, and all the states are included. There are no smart lists that give you a good count, so create the year-end wage file and go that route. So we've talked about the update for the year-end, the tax updates. We've talked about the forms and which are preferred and how to get them. Before we go into the closing checklist, make note of this. If you're on GP10, you've got another whole year on it. At the end of 2012, they will provide a year-end update for GP10, 11, and the new version, GP12, that will be available by then. You'll get one tax update for GP10, but that's it. Then it will be obsolete for payroll. They'll continue support on that model, on that version, for another 5 years, but not on the payroll tax updates. So there's a point where you're going to have to go to 2011, version 11, which is called GP 2010, or you'll have to go up to version 12, and I don't know what they're going to call that yet. We got plenty of time. All right, let's wrap it up by going through the closing procedures. The most important thing you got to do is complete all your pay runs. So we're going to demo this in GP. If I go to batches and I look at my payroll batches, I've got some recurring batches here, but I've also got some single use. And if I don't know what's in those batches, I should find out. Maybe they affect 2011. If they're batches for 2012 payroll, they don't affect me. But if they're 2011, I need to run the payroll on them. Another way to know what's out there is to hit the build and select batches. If any batches are in the busy mode, then that status indicates that somebody's got a build or a calculate in process, and we can't run the year end while we've got that in process. Now I've already created my year-end wage file. So what happens if I try to do a build in this year, 6/1 to 6/15, while I've got my year-end wage file in place? It lets me do the build, but when I go to calculate, it says, sorry, you've already closed 2017. You can't build again. And that's because it knows the bill date here. Okay? So I'm going to remove my build, and then I'm going to remove my year-end closing. I reprocess it, delete it, and then cancel. That can also be done through utilities. You can remove year-end info here, shove it over, and it'll get rid of it. I don't have any now, so I'll see that come up later. Now I can go back to my build, run a payroll. I'll take the bonus batch. And I can do a calculate. and I'm going to post this payroll in 2012. I need to make sure all of these are done. What happens if I'm in the middle of a calculate or beyond posting and I try to do a year-end close? It tells me the converse of what we did before. Now I can't close the year-end because I've got a 2017 pay run in process. Just like when I had the year-end, I couldn't add to it in 2017. So I would have to remove the build in order to close my year-end. Reprocess. So I'm closing 2017. It knows what year to close because it's the year I'm in. If I was in 2018, it would try to close 2018. So you got to be in the right year. All right, so complete all payrolls. And if there's issues, we ought to verify various variances. And here's the tool I use. I have a spreadsheet with 941 information on it, quarter by quarter, and then the sum of all of those. And then I create my year-end wage file and plug in the W3 totals, and I check for variances. And if I've got variances, I better fix that before I move on. And the reason I have variances here is that the 941 just says, take your SUTA at 10.4% and plug it in. Whether you did it right or not, it plugs it into the report. But the W-2s take the withholding, and it was done at 6.2% in the sample data instead of 4.2, so I've over withheld. This is half of the contributions out here, so it equates to the employee withholding, and I've got a variance here. And I can look at a report in Great Plains that actually tells me how much I'm off. When I've created the year-end wage files, it defaults to validate reports on the print W-2. I want to check this while I'm testing, and you can see that I withheld more than I should have. This was 6.2% and this is 4.2%. And that's because I didn't change my tables when I should have. So I need to go back and credit that excess Social Security back to them and get it back to what it should be. And what I normally do is credit the W-2, the total amount of Social Security withheld, and then debit it back to a federal withholding. So the net amount of their check is the same, the net amount of their taxes are the same. When I over withheld, they get back on their tax return as federal or state withholding, whichever one I put it to. Federal usually works fine. So I would export this to an Excel file, sort it and parse it by text, do the math, figure out what's needed, and make the changes. This report also tells me I've got invalid Social Security numbers, 9s and 000s, and things starting with a 6 are invalid. Sometimes it will tell me they're invalid when they aren't, and so you might want to test it on the BSO website where you can pay for a service that tests Social Security numbers to be sure that not only they're valid, but that they go with the name of the individual that you're using it for. So the validation report. Notice this one here. It's telling me that it's going to truncate the address line, which was too long, and that's fine with me. They can truncate it all day long. Doesn't matter to me what address, as long as they have significant amount of information. We're not mailing it there. It's just a mag media file. So as part of my year-end, I create the year-end, test the validation report, and make adjustments for that as well. And I actually have that down here. I should have done some other things along the way, but I did my 941 versus W-2 spreadsheet. That's where I got my number of W-2s. That's where I got this information. And I'm looking for some other markers like the one we just had. I can then make those adjustments as needed and do any month or period end and quarter end reporting, but don't submit any December or fourth quarter reports yet. Not until we're done with everything and know that it checks out from every angle. We've got till the end of January. You don't have to be in a hurry to submit the reports. At this point, we can make our SQL backups, install the payroll year-end update, and if we haven't done it before, and that'll give us the ability to create a final year-end wage file that has the newest code. If you do it earlier, that's fine. But make sure that we get this update in here before we ever start printing W-2s. And that we check all of the things that we validated to be sure they're still reporting the same. That's when you get the validation report, you fix any issues, and then we get a final year-end wage file. And I say final, but there's still some more tests we can do that may reveal changes that would require us to create the year-end wage file again. So, let's create a Mag Media file for those of you who have Mag Media, and then we'll test it with AccuWage. We have W-2 electronic filing. That's Mag Media. We need to put in our PIN number that we got from the BSO website. We have to go to Submitter and make sure we have all the address information. It's going to be an email response, so I want them to confirm that way. So Taylor Stewart Frey at fabricam.com. Even though we say OK, it doesn't save everything. Notice the addresses again. It's only showing me one line of city, and you can plug in more here. Or if there's a foreign address, you change it on the fly here. Then it gives you more room. Otherwise, you've got to use state abbreviations. Not Canadian, not Hispanic, or Mexico. They've got to be, it's a U.S. product. If they're foreign, you'd have to be changing it here. And this is the company setup. In Edit W-2s, we have the ability to change the address here from what we have on file to what their foreign one is. If we've been putting in abbreviations here that are not U.S. abbreviations for the state and not in uppercase, we're going to be getting errors. So keep another file with your foreign addresses and keep their local one here and have one that you plug in later here. Otherwise, I don't edit W-2s. Well, we've got this ready to go. We save and we create. And it's created a file, and mine went to W-2 report. I'm going to do it again. Notice that this is still here, but I'm going to rebrowse to my 2011 payroll year-end folder. It loses the name, W-2 report, in uppercase, no extension. It's a text file, not comma or tab delimited. But because it's text, it wants to assume that extension. So I back out the text period. And now I can mark and replace the file I had. It comes with a report. And it gives me my company information and my submitter information, the totals that are in that file, and the state totals that are in that file. Nice report. And that's Mag Media filing. Now, earlier we looked at printing W-2s. If they're regular, then they'll have regular. If they're Medicare qualified, it'll say MQGE, or if you have both, you'll have 2 lines. Just like you print W3s for one or the other, you have W2 mag media files for one or the other if you have more rows. And this data has to still be in there. If you want to print it for a prior year, you'd have to go to an historical backup if you'd removed history. Well, what's that file look like? If I open it in Notepad, it is a RW federal record followed by an RS state record, and it's got all the information for demographics and amounts all the way across, and it's a huge file, and company information across the top. There's a way to test this file. On the federal website, I showed you earlier that there was a place to download the AccuWage file from that site. There are 2 of them now. There's the PDF, the old version, and a Java format. So I took the latest. I start testing. I browse out to the folder where my W2 report file is, and I go. And if there's no errors, it will automatically come up and say no errors, and do you want to go to Business Services Online and file? And I always say no. I'm not ready to file now. I'm going to be filing when? At the proper date, in either at least at the end of February for paper, and I can wait longer for the mag media. Better to send out the W2s, let them come back if there's issues, fix them, and not have to send in revised returns. I might not even print the W2 copies until the time comes for the employer side, to be sure I don't have to reprint forms. So what are my errors? Well, this one is that I'm using 2017, and it's expecting something from 78 to 2011, certainly not the future. Okay, so that's just an artifact of the data set I was running today, and normally that would be correct. What about these employee-related ones? They've all got the same problem. They've got Social Security numbers that were invalid. The validation report showed us that, and we should have fixed it. There are other kinds of errors you can get. FICA out of balance, Medicare out of balance, federal out of balance, missing data, broken data. You definitely want to look at this report to make sure that your file is clean. And that's why, if I have mag media, I do all of this preparatory work before I ever submit anything and before I print my W2s, because this may uncover errors that relate to the W2s as well. So, create mag media file and test, make corrections, then recreate the W2 file, and edit as needed. I said that I normally don't edit, but if there's foreign addresses and this is my final edit, then I'll drop in those foreign addresses. But if I have to rebuild, I'm going to lose the foreign addresses. So I would recommend you keep that information on a tab in your spreadsheet and call it foreign address, so that if in some future year I have to rebuild this, I would be able to have that information. All right, everything's checked out. AccuWage, mag media reports, summary reports, 941s versus W3s. We are convinced that our numbers are accurate and nobody's going to contest them. So we're ready to print the W2s. We're back to the print W2 window. We want the W2 forms. I'm going to go to single feed. You can print these over and over again. Alright, so here is a 2-up form. When I go to print it, I would only print page 1 to only align it with one form, because this is going to be 15 pages worth. I don't want to waste them. And I can make positive and negative adjustments here. Putting in a minus 0.1. When I put in a positive number, horizontally that pushes the report to the right, negative sucks it back to the left, negative vertical pulls it up, and a positive number would push it down. So it's left, right, down, and up, depending on what the signs are. And you can get the whole report to move over without having to realign it in Report Writer. Remember those settings, write them down, because next year you may need to use them again. It won't remember them until you close out of Great Plains for the day. It will remember them till then it loses them and gets them back to 0. That's how you push the whole thing left, right, up, or down. When you print them, stand by your printer. Start by having regular paper in, printing this up as a test, lining it up with the form, or just having one form in there. See how the printer does. And you might have to edit things to get it to fit the forms you bought if they weren't certified forms. Then put all the forms in, print to screen, and let it rip to all pages. But watch each page as it comes out, or do 10 at a time and keep changing the ranges down here. I could do 1 through 10, and then 10 through 20, and I would have control. Make sure that each one is aligned correctly, because this is a tight form, and if things are slightly off, they may be in the wrong window. We are done printing W-2s. We've got everything we wanted. We're ready to stuff them and mail them out. We want to be sure that we don't forget to submit the federal, let's call it the employer W-2s and Mag Media on time. But that can wait till the end of February or the end of March. Whereas the other limits were in here somewhere, February 29th and March 2nd. That's my picture again. Where's Great Plains? All right. What else can be done to close payroll down? It isn't payroll, but it is GP. We have to close the 2012 year and close the 2011 year and close the 2012. So under Admin, Company, Fiscal Periods, I'll go back to 2011. If any of these periods were open, I would want to at least close payroll and leave these open if I'm still working in December. Otherwise, I could close all, especially if I'm in January. But if I'm going to be making any journal entries, I might need to leave financial open. But otherwise, pretty tight ship. We don't want anybody trying to add to something that we've published year-end reports on. So we close the year. And that just means when I put in a date for that year, it isn't going to let me save anything. The other one that we need, is the new year. And mine has been set up already, and all the periods are closed, but I would want to open January so I can start using it. How do you create a year? You plug it in, and I'm going to go to 2060, and you plug it in from first day to last day. It doesn't go that far. Oh, this has to be 20, I'll make it 2040. And then you calculate, and it gives you your periods, and you can tweak them from there, and you can close all, and then open up just the ones that you're doing. So 11 and 12 need to be closed or created. Attendance setup for 2012. If you're not using payroll and you're using attendance, then we need to do something there. So I'm going to go to setup. Human resources. And find the attendance setup. It's been working in 2017 all year, and now I would have to change it to 2018 on that screen, and then I'd have to create accrual periods for 2018. So 2017 went like that on a bi-weekly basis. It started in January and went most of the way here. I'm really surprised that worked there. But I can go to the next year and create these. Now, normally these are all grayed out, and then when I type this one and this one, it fills in the rest. Whether that's semi-monthly or bi-weekly or whatever style, it will fill in this information when you put in 1 or 2 significant dates. So we need all that set up for accrual periods for attendance. We also got to go into the business portal if you're using the Human Resources Management self-service screen to record time and attendance and create a time card pay schedule. Now my business portal is having some problems right now, but you would go to admin, time card setup, and those of you who've used this tool, there would be a box over here, and you would create a new pay schedule based on the pay periods for the year, and then the business portal will be able to post those into batches in Great Plains. Archiving human resources is optional. So under Utilities, Human Resources, there's an archive tool. If you use these HR-only fields, not the ones that integrate with payroll, then you can archive the information and pull it up from an archive, and it's not in your normal lookups anymore. So what I mean by that is if you look at almost any report in Human Resources, there are reports for archived employees that pull from that file, and there are reports for everybody else that's alive that pulls from the employee file. And that was because I'm losing concentration. Yep. You have all of these human resource fields, and you can get rid of those details and keep them for payroll. That's the point. So how do you archive payroll? That was only human resources archiving. To archive payroll, you would actually have to go into SQL Server Management Studio, create a new database, and back up and restore live data from Great Plains' current database to an historical database, and then you have a complete backup. And you would label it as historical. So in my installation, I've only got 2 databases, actually 1, just this test company. But I could create a TWOH for historical. Then all that history from payroll and GL and payables and all that is archived there, and I can go back to GP and remove history on anything in the live data. I'd have a different login for a different company for the historical, but we can get rid of data here. And most people are thinking about doing that every 5 or 10 years. They get tired of all the deleted employees that are inactive and all the obsolete pay codes, deductions, and benefits, and they want to remove history, which then enables them to remove setups that are obsolete. But other than that, there's no archive for payroll other than you can buy a tool from a different ISV provider that will essentially migrate the data from live to the historical database selectively by module, and not just take everything, but take just what you want and add it to one and remove it from the other, so that there's no duplication. So if you ever want to know about those tools, we can get you the info. All right, we're almost there. We have put in the tax update, done all our verifications, printed W-2s, generated mag media. Some of these haven't been submitted yet, but they're waiting. We've done the year-end closing for fiscal periods, attendance setups, time card schedules, and archiving. And if we haven't already yet, and it's now the new year, we want to install the tax updates. If you put in the tax updates in December, even though you finished all your payrolls, and then somebody gets terminated and you got to pay them, even though you didn't plan to, they're going to be withholding at the 2012 federal rate. So you might want to wait till you're sure and do it on January 1st or 2nd. And then the very last thing you should remember, don't forget that you've got these future dated submissions that you need to do in February or March. So be sure to put reminders in your mailbox and your calendar so that you don't forget to do that. And that's what we have. Hope you have a great year end. Give me a call if you need support, and I'll leave my information up here. One last thing on this document I just noticed for you techie people who want to know the tables that were affected with the update. There's the payroll changes that were put in. But otherwise, that's where you call for support. Have a great day.